Hello. I thought it would be cool to continue reading H.P. Lovecraft. I'm currently writing a story inspired, specifically by Cthulhu, specifically from the movie Underwater, which takes inspiration from H.P. Lovecraft. So I'm currently writing fan fiction. So if you're interested, I will leave the link down below. It's fan fiction about the Untamed, but I just take the characters and kind of, you don't really need to know about the Untamed to know, what I'm trying to say? Anyways, enough self-promo. I got this book in the New York Public Library about 3 years ago. They came up with this type of design. It's really pretty. It says at the back, the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. I had never read H.P. Lovecraft before. All I knew was about Cthulhu, which is the most popular, but I haven't gone back to read, so I thought it would be nice to just, so let's read The Festival. I was far from home, and the spell of the eastern sea was upon me. In the twilight I heard a pounding on the rocks, and I knew it lay just over the hill, where the twisting willows withered against the clearing sky and the first stars of evening. And because my fathers had called me to the old town beyond, I pushed on through the shallow, new-fallen snow along the road that soared lonely up to where Aldebaran twinkled among the trees, on toward the very ancient town I'd never seen but often dream of. It was the Yuletide the men call Christmas, though they know in their hearts it is older than Bethlehem and Babylon, older than Memphis and mankind. It was the Yuletide, and I had come at last to the ancient sea town where my people had dwelt and kept festival, and the elder time when festival was forbidden, where also they had commanded their sons to keep festivals once every century, that the memory of primal secrets might not be forgotten. Mine were an old people, and were old even when this land was settled 300 years before, and they were strange, because they had come as a dark, furtive folk from opiate southern gardens of orchids, and spoken another tongue before they learnt the tongue of the blue-eyed fishers. And now they were scattered, and shared only the rituals of mysteries that none living could understand. I was the only one who came back that night to the old fishing town, as legend bade, for only the poor and the lonely remember. Then beyond the hill's crest I saw Kingsport, outspread frostily in the gloaming, snowy Kingsport, with its ancient vines and steeples, ridge pools and chimney pots, wharves and small bridges, willow trees and graveyards, endless labyrinths of steep, narrow, crooked streets, and dizzy church crowd, central peak that time durst not touch. Ceaseless mazes of colonial houses piled and scattered at all angles and levels like a child's disordered blocks, antiquity hovering on gray wings over winter-whitened gables and gambrel roofs, fanlights and small paned windows, one by one gleaming out in the cold dusk to join Orion and the Arctic stars, Orion. And against the rotting wharves the sea pounded, the secretive immemorial sea out of which the people had come in the elder time. Besides the road at its crest, a still higher summit rose, bleak and windswept, and I saw that it was burying ground where black gravestones stuck ghoulishly through the snow like the decayed fingernails of a gigantic corpse. The printless road was very lonely, and sometimes I thought I heard a distant horrible creaking as of a gibbet in the wind. They had hanged 4 kinsmen of mine for witchcraft in 1692, but I did not know just where. As the road wound down the seaward slope, I listened for the merry sounds of a village at evening, but did not hear them. Then I thought of the season, and felt that these old Puritan folks might well have Christmas customs strange to me, and full of silent hearside prayer. So after that I did not listen for merriment or look for wayfarers, but kept on down past the hushed light farmhouses and shadowy stone walls to where the signs of ancient shops and sea taverns creaked in the silt breeze, and the grotesque knockers of pillared doorways glistened along deserted, unpaved lines in the light of little curtained windows. I had seen maps of the town and knew where to find the home of my people. It was told that I should be known and welcomed, for village legend lives long. So I hastened through Back Street to Circle Court and across the fresh snow on the one flagstone pavement in town to where green lanes led off behind the market house. The old map still held good, and I had no trouble. Through at Arkham they must have lied when they said the trolleys ran to this place, since I saw not a wire overhead. Snow would have hid the rails in any case. I was glad I had chosen to walk, for the white village had seemed very beautiful from the hill, and now I was eager to knock at the door of my people. The seventh house on the left in Green Lane, with an ancient peaked roof and jutting second story, all built before 1650. There were lights inside the house when I came upon it, and I saw from the diamond window panes that it must have been kept very close to its antique stake. The upper part overhung the narrow grouse-ground street and nearly met the overhanging part of the house opposite, so that I was almost in a tunnel, with the low stone doorstep wholly free from snow. There was no sidewalk, but many houses had high doors reached by double flights of steps with iron railings. It was an odd scene, and because I was strange to New England, I had never known its life before. Though it pleased me, I would have relished it better if there had been footprints in the snow and people in the streets, and a few windows without drawn curtains. When I sounded the archaic iron knocker, I was half afraid. Some fear had been gathering in me, perhaps because of the strangeness of my heritage, and the bleakness of the evening, and the queerness of the silence, in that aged town of curious customs. And when my knock was answered, I was fully afraid, because I had not heard any footsteps before the door creaked open. But I was not afraid, for the gowned, slippered old man in the doorway had a bland face that reassured me, and though he made signs that he was dumb, he wrote a quaint and ancient welcome with the stylus and wax tablet he carried. He beckoned me into a low candlelit room with massive exposed rafters and dark, stiff, sparse furniture of the 17th century. The past was vivid there, for not an attribute was missing. There was a cavernous fireplace, a spinning wheel at which a bent old woman in loose wrapper and deep poke bonnet sat back towards me, silently spinning despite the festive season. An indefinite dampness seemed upon the place, and I marveled that no fire should be blazing. The high black settle faced the row of curtained windows at the left and seemed to be occupied, though I was not sure. I did not like everything about what I saw, and felt again the fear that I had had. This fear grew stronger from what had been before lessened it, for the more I looked at the old man's bland face, the more its very baldness terrified me. The eyes never moved, and the skin was too like wax. Finally, I was sure it was not a face at all, but a fiendishly cunning mask. But the flabby hands, curiously gloved, wrote genuinely on the tablet and told me I must wait a while before I could be led to the place of the festival. Pointing to a chair, table, and a pile of books, the old man now left the room, and when I sat down to read, I saw that the books were hoary and moldy, and that they included Old Morris Wilde, Marvels of Science, and the terrible Pseudocisms Triumphants of Joseph Glanville, published in 1681, the shocking Daemonolatria of Regimus, printed in 1595 at Lyons, and worst of all, the unmentionable Necromonicon of the mad Arab Abdul al-Zared in Aulus Wormius' forbidden Latin translation, a book which I had never seen, but of which I had heard monstrous things whispered. No one spoke to me, but I could hear the creaking of signs in the wind outside, and the whir of the wheel as the buttoned old woman continued her silent spinning. I thought the room and the books and the people were morbid and disquieting, but because of an old tradition of my father's had summoned me to a strange feastings, I resolved to expect queer things. So I tried to read, and soon became tremblingly absorbed by something I found in that accursed Namacon. A thought, and a legend too hideous for sanity or consciousness, but I disliked it when I fancied I heard the closing of one of the windows at the settled face, as it had been stealthily opened. It had seemed to follow a whirring that was not of the old woman's spinning wheel. This was not much, though, for the old woman was spinning very hard, and the age clock had been striking. After that, I lost the feeling that there were persons on the settle, and was reading intently and shudderingly when the old man came back, booted and dressed in a loose antique costume, and sat down on the very bench so that I could not see him. It was certainly nervous waiting, and the blasphemous book in my hands made it doubtably so. When 11 struck, however, the old man stood up, glided to a massive carved chest in a corner, and got 2 hooded cloaks, one of which he donned, and the other which he draped around the old woman, who was ceasing her monotonous spinning. Then they both stared for the outer door, the woman lamely creeping, and the old man, after picking up the very book I had been reading, beckoning me as he drew his hood over the unmoving face, or mask. We went out into the moonless and tortuous network of that incredibly ancient town, went out as the lights in the curtained windows disappeared one by one, and the dog's star lead as the throng of cowled, cloaked fingers that poured silently from every doorway, and formed monstrous processions up the street, and that passed the creaking signs and antediluvian glabs, the thatched rifts and the diamond-paned windows, threading precipitous lanes where decaying houses overlapped and crumbled together, gliding across open courts and churchyards where the bobbling lanterns made eldritch drunken constellations. Amid these hushed throngs, I followed my voiceless guides, jostled by elbows that seemed preternaturally soft, and pressed by chests and stomachs that were abnormally pulpy. But seeing never a face, and hearing never a word, up, the earring columns slithered, and I saw that all the travelers were converging as they flowed near a sort of focus of crazy alleys at the top of a high hill in the center of the town, where perched a giant white church. I had seen it from the road crest when I looked at Kingsport in the new dusk, and had made me shiver because Aldebaran had seemed to balance itself a moment of the ghostly spire. There was an open space around the church, partly a churchyard with spectral shafts, and partly a half-paved square swept nearly bare of snow by the wind and lined with unwholesomely archaic houses, having peaked roofs and overhanging gables. Death fires danced over the tombs, revealing gruesome vistas, through queerly failing to cast any shadow. Past the churchyard, there was no houses. I could see over the hill summit and watch the glimmer of stars on the harbor, though the town was invisible in the dark. Only once in a while, a lantern bobbed horribly through serpentine alleys on its way to overtake the throng that was now leaping speechlessly into the church. I waited till the crowd had oozed into the black doorways, until all the stragglers had followed. The old man was pulling at my sleeve, but I was determined to be the last. Then finally I went, the sinister man and the old spinning woman before me, crossing the threshold into the swarming temple of unknown darkness. I turned once to look at the outside world as the churchyards cast a sickly glow on the hilltop pavement, and as I did so I shuddered, for though the wind had not left much snow, a few patches did remain on the path near the door, and in the fleeting backyard we looked, it seemed to my troubled eyes that they bore no marks of passing feet, not even mine. The church was scarce lighted by all the lanterns that had entered it, for most of the throng had already vanished. They had streamed up the aisle between the high white pews to the trap-door of the vaults, which yawned loathsomely open just before the pulpit, and were now squirmingly noiselessly in. I followed dumbly down the foot-worn steps into the dank, suffocating crypt. The tale of that sinuous line of night marches seemed very horrible, and I saw them wriggling into a venerable tomb. They seemed more horrible still. Then I noticed that the tomb's floor had an aperture down, which the throng was sliding, and in a moment where we were all descending an ominous staircase of rough-hewn stone, a narrow spiral staircase, damp and peculiarly odorous, that wound endlessly down into the bowels of the hill past monotonous walls of dripping stone blocks and crumbling mortar. It was silent, shocking descent, and I observed after a horrible interval that the walls and steps were changing in nature, as if chiseled out of solid rock. What mainly troubled me was that the myriad footfalls made no sound and set up no echoes. After more eons of descent, I saw some side passages and burrows leading from unknown races of blackness to the shaft of nighted mystery. Soon they became excessively numerous, like impious catacombs of nameless menace, and their pungent odor of decay grew quite unbearable. I knew we must have passed down through the mountain beneath the earth of Kingsport itself, and I shivered that a town should be so aged and maggoty with subterraneous evil. Then I saw the lurid shimmering of pale light and heard the insidious lapping of sunless waters. Again, I shivered, for I did not like the things that the night had brought, and wished bitterly that no forefather had summoned me to this primal rite. As the steps in the passage grew broader, I heard another sound, the thin, whining mockery of a feeble flute, and suddenly there spread out before me the boundless vista of an inner world, a vast fungous shore lit by a belching column of sick greenish flame, and washed by a wild, oily river that flowed from an abyss frightful and unexpected to join the blackest gulfs of an emerald ocean. Fainting and gasping, I looked at the unhollowed ibris of a titan toadstool, leprous fire and slamming water, and saw the cloaked throngs forming a semicircle around the blazing pillar. It was the Yule rite, older than man and fated to survive him, the primal rite of the solstice and of spring promised beyond the snows, the rite of fire and evergreen, light and music, and in the Stygian grotto I saw them do the rite, and adore the sick pillar of flame, and throw into the water handfuls gouged out of the vicious vegetation which glistened green in the chloric glare. I saw this, and I saw something amorphously squatted far away from the light, piping noisily on a flute, and as the thing piped, I thought I heard Nuxia's muffled flutterings in the voided darkness where I could not see. But what frightened me most was that flaming column, spouting volcanically from depths profound and unconceivable, casting no shadow as healthy flame should, and coating the nitrous stone above with a nasty venomous verdigris. For all in all the seething combustion, no warmth lay, but only the clamminess of death and corruption. The man who brought me now squirmed to a point directly beside the hideous flame and made stiff ceremonial motions to the semicircle he faced. A certain stage of the ritual they did groveling obsceneness, especially when he held above his head the abhorrent necromonicon he had taken with him, and I shared all the obscenities because I had been summoned to this festival by the writings of my forefathers. Then the old man made a signal to the half-seen flute player in the darkness, which player thereupon changed its feeble drone to a scarce louder drone, another key, precipitating as it did so a horror unthinkable and unexpected. As for this horror, I sank nearly to the lichen earth, transfixed with a dread not of those nor any word, but only of the mad space between the stars. Out of the unimaginable blackness beyond the gangrenous glare of that cold flame, out of the tertian leagues through which the oily river rolled uncanny, unheard, and unsuspected, there flopped rhythmically a horde of tamed, trained, hybrid winged things that no eye could ever wholly grasp or sound brain ever wholly remember. They were not altogether crows, nor moles, nor buzzards, nor ants, nor vampire bats, nor decomposed human beings, but something I cannot and must not recall. They flopped limply along, half with their webbed feet and half with their members' wings, and as they reached the throng of subalterns, the cowled figures seized and mounted them, and rode off one by one along the reaches of the unlightened river into pits and galleries of panic where poison sprung freed, frightful and undiscovered cataracts. The old spinning woman had gone with the throng, and the old man remained only because I had refused when he motioned me to seize an animal and ride like the rest. I saw when I staggered to my feet that the Morpheus flute player had rolled out of sight, but two of the beasts were patiently standing by. As I hung back, the old man produced his stylus and tablet and wrote that he was the true deputy of my fathers, who had founded the Yule worship in this ancient place, that it had been decreed I should come back, and that the most secret mysteries were yet to be performed. He wrote this in a very ancient hand, and when I still hesitated, he pulled from his loose robe a seal ring and a watch, both with my family arms, to prove that he was what he said. But it was a hideous proof, because I knew from old papers that that watch had been buried with my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather in 1698. Presently, that old man drew back his hood and pointed to the family resemblance in his face, but I only shuddered because I was sure that that face was merely a devilish waxen mask. The flopping animals were now scratching relentlessly at the lichens, and I saw that old man was nearly restless himself. When one of the things began to waddle and edge away, he turned quickly to stop it, so that the suddenness of his motion dislodged the waxen mask from what should have been his head. And then, because the nightmare's position barred me from the stone staircase down which we had come, I flung myself into the oily underground river that bubbled somewhere to the caves of the sea, flung myself into that putrescent juice of earth's inner horrors before the grandness of my screams could bring down upon me all the charnel legions these post-gulfs might conceal. At the hospital, they told me I had been found half frozen in Kingsport Harbor at dawn, clinging to the drifting spar that accident sent to save me. They told me I had taken the wrong fork of the hill road that night before and fallen over the cliffs at Orange Point, a thing they deduced from prints found in the snow, There was nothing I could say because everything was wrong. Everything was wrong, with the broad window showing a sea of roofs in which only about 1 in 5 was ancient and the sound of trolleys and motors in the streets below. They insisted that this was Kingsport, and I could not deny it. When I went delirious at hearing that the hospital stood near the old churchyard and Central Hill, they sent me to St. Mary's Hospital in Arkham, where I could have better care. I liked it there, for the doctors were broad-minded and even lent me their influence in obtaining the carefully sheltered copy of Alzard's objectionable Necromonicon from the library of Miskatonic University. They said something about a psychosis and agreed I had better get any harassing obsessions off my mind. So I read that hideous chapter and shuddered doubly because it was indeed not new to me. I had seen it before. Let footprints tell what they might, and where it was I hadn't seen it where it's best forgotten. There was no one, in waking hours, who could remind me of it, but my dreams are filled with terror because of phrases I dare not quote. I dare quote only one paragraph, put in such English as I can make from my awkward low Latin. The nethermost caverns, wrote the mad Arab, are not for the fathoming of eyes at sea, for the marvels are strange and terrific. Cursed the ground where dead thoughts live, new and oddly bodied, and evil the mind that is held by no head. Wisely did Ibn Shakabau say that happy is a tomb where no wizard hath lain, and happy the town at night whose wizards are all ashes. For it is of old rumor that the soul of the devil brought hastens not from his channeled clay, but fasts and instruct the very worm that gnaws, till out of corruption horrid life sprang, and the dull scavengers of earth waxed crafty to vex it and swell monstrous to plague it. Great holes secretly are digged where earth's pores ought to suffice, and things have learned to walk that ought to crawl. Oh, the next is The Call of Cthulhu. This one is very long. Very, very long. Oh, wait, the horror? The Horror in the Museum. Hold on. Oh, it's already 22 minutes. Pretty long. Okay, this one is very long, so it's basically this. From pages 458 to 482. I'm pretty sure. So, next time, if you want. The language is a bit difficult, and sometimes my brain makes up the words that are not there, but hope you enjoyed it.